Hey everyone, Anime Fiend here. Anime worlds can look incredible massive cities, wild powers, legendary heroes, but let's be real, a lot of these places would be absolute nightmares to actually live in. In this series, we're ranking the worst anime worlds to live in, not based on how cool they look, but on how likely you are to suffer, struggle, or straight up die if you were just a normal person trying to survive. We'll be breaking each world down using a scoring system that looks at things like daily safety, quality of life, long term survival, and of course, my own personal judgment as someone who definitely wouldn't last 5 minutes in half of these worlds. By the end of each episode, we'll combine the scores and see where the world lands on the list, from barely survivable to why would anyone choose to live there. So grab your ODM gear and let's get started. The world of Attack on Titan is defined by constant fear and limitations. Humanity is cramped into a small amount of land surrounded by massive walls, with barely enough resources to survive. Outside those walls are Titans, creatures that exist solely to hunt and eat humans, and inside them is a society riddled with corruption, oppression, and lies. Let's start with the most obvious part of all living behind the walls. At first glance, living behind the walls might seem like the safest option. You're protected from the Titans, you have a home, as long as the walls stand, you're technically safe, but that is mostly an illusion. The anime makes this painfully clear from the first episode with one of the most iconic lines. At that moment, we knew humanity was nothing more than cattle. And honestly, that comparison fits perfectly. The walls don't just keep Titans out, they keep the people trapped inside. Humanity is boxed into a small, enclosed space with no real freedom to explore and expand. You can't leave, you can't see what's beyond the walls, your entire life dictated by where the walls allow you to exist. So even if you're safe, what kind of freedom is that really? Daily life inside the walls is monotonous and restrictive. Most people are born, live, and die without ever seeing anything beyond their district. The world is reduced to stone walls, narrow streets, and constant reminders that if those walls ever fall, everything ends. In many ways, living behind the walls is less like being protected and more like being imprisoned. You're not free, you're just waiting. Waiting for the walls to fail, waiting for disaster, and waiting for a threat that everyone knows is out there, but pretends won't come. And unfortunately, that's just the beginning. Because even inside the walls, survival isn't guaranteed, especially when it comes to food. One of the biggest problems with living behind the walls is something far less flashy than Titans, but just as deadly in the long run: limited resources. Because humanity is confined to such a small area of land, there's only so much space available for farming, livestock, and food production. No matter how hard people work, they're always fighting against the same problem. There isn't enough land to support a large population comfortably. This means food scarcity, especially anything considering a luxury. Meat in particular is so rare that when Sasha steals a piece, everyone who sees it is completely shocked. That moment isn't played for comedy, it's a reminder of how desperate things really are. For most people, meat isn't a regular meal, it's something you might never taste at all. When resources are stretched so thin, this entire society feels it. Hunger becomes normal, rations are tightly controlled, and the people at the bottom suffer the most, with those in power continuing to live more comfortably deeper inside the walls. This lack of resources also fuels many of the cruel decisions made by the government, like sending people out to die simply because there's too many mouths to feed. Survival isn't about fairness, it's about numbers. And as bad as scarcity is, it's made even worse by the fact that the greatest threat to humanity is always just on the other side of a wall, waiting for the smallest mistake. From the very beginning of Attack on Titan, the Titans are established as the ultimate nightmare. They aren't just monsters, they're an ever present reminder that humanity is one mistake away from extinction. Titans are massive humanoid creatures that range anywhere from around 12 feet tall to towering giants over 100 feet in height. They don't need food, They don't have societies, and they don't negotiate. Their only purpose seems to be hunting down and eating humans. What makes this even worse is that most people living inside the walls have never actually seen a titan, and they live their entire lives in fear of them. Every day feels safe until it suddenly doesn't. All it takes is one breach, one failed gate, or one unexpected titan, and the entire district can be wiped out. When the walls fall, there's no escape. Civilians have no way to fight back, and even trained soldiers struggle to survive. You're completely at the mercy of creatures that are faster, stronger, and nearly impossible to kill without specialized equipment and training. That looming threat creates a society built on fear and denial. People convince themselves the walls will never fall because the alternative is too terrifying to accept. But deep down, everybody knows the truth. Safety in Attack on Titan is temporary. And as horrifying as the Titans are, some of the worst dangers in this world don't come from the monsters at all, but from people in charge. As bad as life is with Titans constantly threatening humanity, what really makes living in this world unbearable is the people in power. The government behind the walls repeatedly makes decisions that protect themselves while actively hurting everyone else. One of the clearest examples of this corruption is how progress is deliberately suppressed. New technologies and advancements are held back, even though better weapons and tools could drastically improve humanity's chances of survival. This becomes even more frustrating later on when it is revealed that humanity isn't alone in the world, and that enemies from outside the walls are actively planning their extinction. Another baffling decision is how the military is structured. The strongest, most skilled soldiers are encouraged to join the military police, where they live safely inside the innermost wall as glorified guards. Meanwhile, the scout regiment, the group actually fighting the Titans and gathering vital information, gets the least support and suffers the highest death rate. If survival were truly the priority, the best fighters would be on the front lines, not protecting corrupt officials. Corruption also shows itself in far more brutal ways. When food became scarce, the government knowingly sent people who weren't fit for combat outside the walls to fight titans. This wasn't strategy, it was population control. They sacrificed civilians simply because there weren't enough resources to go around. Then there's the anti personnel control squad, assigning Kenny Ackerman, a literal psychopath, to lead a unit with the authority to assassinate others, showing a complete lack of moral responsibility. Giving someone like that legal power to kill is essentially the same as putting a serial killer in charge of law enforcement. In this world, the government doesn't exist to protect people, it exists to maintain control. And for the average citizen, that makes survival feel less like living and more like waiting to be discarded. But corruption isn't limited to bad leadership. In the world of Attack on Titan, oppression goes even deeper, sometimes taking the form of outright slavery. While it isn't always front and center, slavery and oppression are deeply woven into the world of Attack on Titan. And when the story finally pulls back the curtain, it becomes clear just how brutal this world really is. One of the earliest and most disturbing examples comes from the backstory of Ymir. After her village is destroyed during a time of constant war, she and many others are captured and turned into slaves. They are forced into hard labor, treated as disposable, and punished brutally for even the smallest mistake. Beatings, torture, mutilation, and executions are common, all used tools to keep people obedient. What makes this even worse is that the cruelty doesn't disappear with time, it just evolves. In the modern era of the story, the Eldians are subjected to systematic oppression by Marley. After centuries of war, Marley gains the upper hand and enslaves the Eldian people, turning them into weapons rather than individuals. Eldians are forced to live in internment zones, heavily monitored and stripped of basic rights, treated as less than human simply because of who they are. Since only Eldians can become Titans, Marley exploits this fact to maintain power. Eldians are coerced into becoming Titan shifters and fighting Marley's wars with the promise that their families will be treated better if they comply. It is an impossible choice: become a living weapon or watch your loved ones suffer. and the cost is horrifying. Anyone who inherits the power of a Titan is sentenced to die after just 13 years. Their shortened lifespan is treated as an unacceptable collateral, reinforcing the idea that Eldian lives are expendable. In a world where the entire group of people are enslaved, manipulated, and sacrificed for political gain, survival alone doesn't mean freedom. And when oppression lasts this long, it inevitably leads to something even worse: endless war. When the story finally reveals the truth about the world, one thing becomes painfully clear. The conflict at the heart of Attack on Titan has been going on for over 2,000 years. And for the average person living in this world, that means there's no real hope that things will ever get better. After Ymir gained the power of the Titan, the Eldian Empire used that power to dominate the world for generations. With Titans as weapons of war, the Eldians held control for centuries, leaving behind a legacy of destruction and resentment that never truly faded. Eventually, King Karl Fritz became overwhelmed with guilt over the atrocities committed by his people. In an attempt to end the bloodshed, he worked with the Tiber family to bring the Eldian Empire to an end. His solution, however, didn't create peace, it just pushed the problem somewhere else. Fritz relocated many Eldians to a remote island later known as Paradise. There he built the massive walls and used the founding Titan's power to erase the memories of his people, making them believe they were the last remnants of humanity. To ensure the conflict wouldn't continue, he also imposed an oath of nonviolence so powerful none of his successors could break it. This decision crippled the Eldians on Paradise while giving Marley the opportunity to rise to power. Marley seized control of 7 of the 9 Titans and used them to dominate other nations, all while continuing to oppress Eldians left on the mainland. Instead of ending the war, Fritz's actions ensured that hatred, fear, and revenge would keep cycling endlessly. Generations after generations is born into a conflict they didn't start and can't escape. As long as the conflict exists, the world will always be one step away from total annihilation, especially with a weapon capable of ending everything at once. Even with centuries of war, oppression, and suffering, nothing in Attack on Titan is more terrifying than the rumbling. It's the ultimate doomsday weapon, and the reason the rest of the world feared the people behind the walls for so long. When King Karl Fritz retreated to Paradise Island, he issued a warning to the rest of the world. If anyone attacked the Eldians behind the wall, he will unleash the rumbling. This would release hundreds of thousands of colossal titans hidden within the walls, trampling the world flat and wiping out everything in their path. And the worst part, the threat was completely believable. While other nations eventually developed weapons capable of dealing with individual titans, nothing could stop an army of that size. The rumbling wasn't just a bluff, it was a guaranteed extinction event. Ironically, Fritz never intended to use it. When he moved to Paradise, he also used the founding titan to swear an oath of nonviolence, preventing him and any future royal successor from activating the rumbling. This created a fragile balance. The world feared the rumbling while the people of Paradise had no idea it even existed. That balance shattered when Grisha Jaeger stole the power of the founding titan because he wasn't bound by the royal oath. The founding titan was no longer completely restrained. The only remaining requirement, contact with someone of royal blood to access its full power. As the finale proved, once those conditions are met, destroying the entire world becomes disturbingly easy. Entire civilizations can be erased not through long wars, but through a single decision made by one person. Living in a world where global extinction is always one bad decision away isn't just terrifying, it's unbearable. And for the average person, it means your entire existence could end instantly, without warning, no matter where you live. Which brings us to the final point, and the harsh reality behind all of this. It's easy to imagine yourself living in an anime world as one of the heroes, but Attack on Titan completely falls apart when you look at it from the perspective of a normal person. Most people aren't soldiers or Titan shifters, they're civilians trapped behind the walls, dealing with food shortages, corruption, and the constant fear that everything could be wiped out at any moment. Freedom barely exists, the truth is hidden, and safety is never guaranteed. Add in centuries of war, systemic oppression, and the ever present threat of total global destruction, and it becomes clear just how bleak this world really is. To wrap this up, I am going to rate the world of Attack on Titan using 5 key metrics, scoring each one from 1 to 10, and then adding them together for a final score. Daily survival and safety. For over 100 years, life behind the walls was relatively stable. Outside of the Survey Corps, most people never even saw a Titan. And day-to-day life, while restrictive, wasn't immediately dangerous. That all changed the moment the colossal Titan kicked in the gate of Shiganshina overnight. Life behind the walls went from mildly inconvenient to completely unlivable. Anyone who couldn't escape deeper into the walls was immediately surrounded by titans ranging from 12 feet tall to well over 100 feet. Even if a titan doesn't notice you, it can still kill you just by walking through the area you're in. An average human standing near a titan with nothing protecting them is basically guaranteed to die one way or another. And then there's the rumbling. While only a handful of people could even trigger it, the fact remains that it wiped out 80% of humanity. The only reason it didn't completely erase the rest of the world was because Eren allowed the Titan shifters a chance to stop him. Taking all of this into account, I can only give Attack on Titans a score of 1 out of 10. Before the fall of Wall Maria, quality of life, while imperfect, was at least manageable. Even people living near the outer districts seemed to live relatively decent lives. After the Titan invasion, however, everything collapsed. Entire districts were destroyed, countless people lost their homes, and humanity lost nearly one-third of its territory. With less land came massive shortages in food, housing, medicine, and other essential resources. While joining the military could slightly improve your standard of living, only a small percentage of people could do so, and it came with a massive trade off. Better conditions meant regularly risking your life to protect everyone else. Life doesn't become impossible, but it becomes extremely harsh. Because of that, I'm giving quality of life a 2 out of 10. Whether we're talking about political power, military authority, social influence, or possessing one of the 9 titans, the gap between those in power and ordinary civilians is absolutely massive. Most people have zero control over their own fate. Decisions are made by the people who see them as expendable. There's no way to reason with forces that treat human lives as disposable resources. When the power imbalance is this extreme, everyday life becomes unstable and terrifying. Because of that, I'm rating the power gaps and social inequalities a 1 out of 10. The audience managed to survive behind the walls for over a century, believing they were the last remnants of humanity. But once the walls fell, their long-term survival was essentially doomed. Not only were they forced to face the Titans directly, but once the Titans on Paradise were eliminated, the truth came out: the outside world still exists, and most of it wanted them dead. Marley's ongoing wars, combined with its control of 7 of the 9 Titans, ensured that global conflict will never truly stop. Peace was never a realistic option. Because of the constant state of hostility, I can only give long-term survival a 2 out of 10. The last metric is entirely subjective. It's about how appealing the world is to live in, how I think I'd fare mentally, and whether any amount of cool factors could outweigh the negatives. And honestly, I can't. Between constant confinement, resource scarcity, slavery, endless wars, government corruption, and ever present threats of being eaten by titans, this world is unbearable, and one of these factors alone would make a setting miserable. All of them happening at once is overwhelming. Because of that, I'm giving the world of Attack on Titan a 1 out of 10 on my personal misery scale. That brings the world of Attack on Titan to a final score of 7 out of 50, making it one of the worst anime worlds imaginable to actually live in. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comment section down below.